The room felt suffocating. The scent of lilies and rose petals in the air was a stark contrast to the cold emptiness that churned inside me. I stood there, a wedding dress clinging to my skin, yet all I could feel was the crushing weight of everything that had led to this moment. The day I had dreamt of for years was here, yet my heart wasn't in it. Jason was standing beside me, looking like the perfect groom. Tall, handsome, with that easy charm that made everyone around him melt. But it wasn't his appearance that held my attention. It was the way his eyes flickered elsewhere, not to me, but to her. Grace Fields. It was like déjà vu. I had been here before, and I knew exactly how this would end. It was no surprise, really. Jason had always been loyal to the image of Grace in his mind, his white moonlight, the girl he could never forget. Our wedding was a mere formality in his eyes. He didn't see me, not truly, and never had. Mr. Young, the officiant, asked, his voice soft but deliberate, "Do you take Miss Chen to be your wife?" My breath caught in my throat. I waited, hoping he'd look at me, hoping he'd see me for the first time today, see me. But Jason didn't turn to face me. Instead, he let go of my hand, the gentle grip I had once relied on, and turned, not toward me, but toward the door. His eyes were locked on the one person who had always haunted his heart. Grace. Gasps of shock rippled through the room as he dashed out, abandoning me at the altar in front of everyone. His mother's outraged voice rang out, "What do you think you're doing, Jason?" I felt a sharp sting in my chest, but something deep inside me stirred a strange sense of release. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment that would change everything. Jason had chosen Grace over me once again, and this time, there was no going back. I could hear the whispers around me, the guests unsure of what to do, murmuring under their breath, eager for the next chapter of this drama. The tension was thick, the air electric, but as much as it hurt, as much as I could feel the years of my heart being shattered in one single moment, I knew something had shifted within me. The girl who had once been in love with him was no longer the same. I had been reborn, and so had he. I turned to my parents, who stood frozen, caught in the wake of Jason's sudden exit. They were equally stunned, but I wasn't. I'd known this was coming. I had been living in the shadow of Grace for too long, and as I watched Jason run, his back disappearing out the door, I understood one thing clearly. I was no longer the girl who would wait. This time, I would not be the one left behind. No longer the naive girl chasing someone who didn't even know he was chasing the wrong dream. Jason's exit was a shock to everyone in the room, but not to me. The hollow silence that followed his abrupt departure felt like an eternity. My heart thudded painfully in my chest, but strangely, I didn't feel tears. I was too numb. Was this what it felt like to be free? I could hear my mother's voice, trembling with fury. "Jason, what is the meaning of this? Come back here right now." But the doors had already swung shut behind him, and the moment felt final. I felt his absence in every fiber of my being, not because I still loved him, but because the man I thought I knew, the man I had once given my heart to, had disappeared long before today. My mother rushed to me, trying to comfort me, but I could barely process her words. My father's face was an unreadable mask. I knew what he was thinking. The young family was close to ours. Their success, their power, their wealth, it was all intertwined with my own family. Our wedding had been the event that symbolized our family's continued alliance, and now it was crumbling. It was one thing to lose Jason, but the damage that would follow, the financial repercussions, the public humiliation, was something my father would never forgive. I stood there in the center of the room, the wedding guests whispering amongst themselves, unsure whether to leave or stay. My father turned to face me. His eyes were filled with disappointment, anger, and something I hadn't seen in him before, fear. But I didn't care. Not anymore. "Emma, are you okay?" My father's voice broke through my daze. "Don't," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Don't pretend to care now." The words felt like they had been ripped from my chest. I hadn't meant to say them aloud, but they were true. For so many years, my father had cared more about his business than about me, and I had let myself be okay with that. I had let myself believe that as long as Jason and I were together, everything would fall into place. But now, all I felt was betrayal. Jason's abandonment was just the final blow in a long series of emotional wounds that had festered in the shadows. I couldn't stay here, not in this gilded cage, surrounded by people who had never truly seen me, never truly understood me. I turned to face the doors, my gaze lingering on the emptiness that Jason's departure left behind. He'd run off to Grace, and I was certain he thought he could fix everything by chasing after her. But this time, he was too late. He always would be. 6 months ago, I would have begged him to come back, to hold me like he used to whisper sweet promises into my ear. But that girl was gone. I had died in that crash. I had been reborn, and I would no longer be anyone's second choice. Not ever again. Emma, let's go, my mother urged gently. We'll figure this out. But I didn't need them to figure it out for me. I had lived through this before. This time, I had control. This time, I was going to get my justice. I stood tall, pulling myself together as best as I could, and forced a smile. It wasn't for them. It was for me. The realization was like a weight lifting from my chest. I wasn't some girl clinging to a man who didn't deserve her. I wasn't going to let anyone determine my fate anymore. I marched up to the microphone, ignoring the murmurs from the guests. Their curiosity was palpable, but I wouldn't be their entertainment. I wasn't some character in their drama. No, this time, I was the one writing the script. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice trembling slightly, but I forced it to steady. Thank you for attending today. As you all know, the Young family and my family have shared a long history, but this isn't how I imagined the day going. I paused, allowing the silence to swallow the room. My gaze flicked briefly to my father, who looked like he might explode, and then to my mother, who seemed as helpless as I had felt just moments ago. But I couldn't feel sorry for them anymore. Not today. We won't be continuing with the ceremony, I continued, my voice clear now, cutting through the tension like a blade. Jason has decided to follow his heart, and that heart, unfortunately, no longer belongs to me. A gasp went up from the crowd, followed by an uncomfortable shuffle. My parents exchanged glances, no doubt wondering what the next steps would be, but I was done waiting for their approval. I was done being the good, obedient daughter. I wasn't going to hide my pain or allow this tragedy to become a spectacle of politeness and decorum. Jason had treated me like an afterthought for too long, and now I was going to give him a taste of what it felt like to be discarded. I took a deep breath and called up the live feed from the wedding cameras. The faces in the crowd shifted from confusion to shock as the screen flickered to life. And there they were, Jason and Grace, locked in each other's arms, kissing as though the world had fallen away. Jason's eyes were closed in rapture, his fingers tangled in her hair, holding her like he never held me. The room went still. A pin could have dropped, and it would have echoed. I felt a strange satisfaction watching the realization hit my guests. They had come for a wedding, and instead, they were witnessing betrayal in its rawest form. They didn't know the years of pain I had endured, the self-doubt, the rejection, the silent suffering. But now, they were seeing it all laid bare. This was my redemption. I could feel my heart racing, a mix of triumph and grief swirling inside me. I had to finish this. There was no turning back. I grabbed my phone and called Jason, keeping my hand steady. It rang for what felt like an eternity before he answered, his voice already tinged with annoyance. "What do you want, Emma?" he snapped. I suppressed the urge to laugh, the audacity. "Jason," I said, my tone cold, "are you with Grace right now?" There was a long pause, and then I heard the sound of his breath, shallow, rapid on the other end. "You're ridiculous. I told you I had something to take care of." I didn't even flinch. "That something is more important than our wedding?" I asked, my voice now biting. Jason's response was to hang up on me. I looked up, my gaze unwavering, and addressed the room again. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you were expecting a wedding, you're in the wrong place. Jason has already made his choice, and it's not me. So, let's not waste any more time. Please, enjoy the banquet." I smiled, and the guests, unsure of what to do, began to murmur among themselves. I wasn't the heartbroken bride anymore. I was the woman who had been wronged, and I was going to make sure everyone saw it. After the chaos at the wedding, I didn't go home. I couldn't face the stares, the sympathy, or the disappointed silence of my parents. Instead, I drove aimlessly, the night swallowing me whole as I made my way to the one place I could think clearly, a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. The place had always been my escape. No one knew me here. It was where I could breathe, without expectations, without pretending to be something I wasn't. I ordered a coffee, though I didn't feel the need to drink it. I just needed to exist in this moment of peace, even if the world around me was unraveling. I stared at my reflection in the window. The girl staring back at me was someone I barely recognized. Her eyes were dull from crying, her skin pale, and her posture slouched in defeat. But there was something else, something flickering deep within her. It wasn't fear. It wasn't desperation. It was anger. I had spent too many years hoping, praying that Jason would love me the way I loved him, that he would wake up one day and see me, really see me, the way I had always seen him. But that was a fool's dream. I was no longer that fool. Jason hadn't just betrayed me. He had shattered the version of myself that had been living in his shadow. The girl who was willing to forgive him for everything. The girl who was desperate to make things work, even if it meant losing herself in the process. That girl was dead. And in her place, someone new had emerged. Someone stronger. I set my coffee cup down, the sound of porcelain against wood echoing in the empty cafe. I had already made my decision. Revenge. It wasn't enough to let Jason go. It wasn't enough to just walk away. No, I needed him to feel what I had felt. I needed him to understand the cost of his betrayal. And this time, I wouldn't be the one suffering in silence. But it wasn't just about Jason. It wasn't just about getting back at the man who had broken my heart. It was about justice. It was about making sure that everything he had taken from me, my trust, my love, my family's future, would be taken from him, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. No more wealth, no more status, no more grace. I had to start somewhere. I didn't go back to my parents' house. Instead, I went to the one person who might understand. Ruhan Yu. We had met briefly in college, but our paths had never crossed in a significant way until recently. Ruhan wasn't like Jason. He wasn't obsessed with power or the validation that came from money. He had his own family business, but his motivations were different. He was intelligent, calculating, and always seemed to understand the world around him in a way that others didn't. I needed that kind of mind on my side. It wasn't about love or loyalty. Not yet. It was about mutual understanding. Ruhan understood what Jason had done, and he understood the consequences. I arrived at his office an hour later. His assistant looked at me curiously, but let me through without hesitation. Ruhan was sitting behind his desk, his eyes scanning over some papers when I walked in. "Emma," he said, looking up at me. "What's going on? You didn't answer my messages after." "Well, after everything, nothing's going on," I said, sitting down across from him. "But I need your help, and I need it now." Ruhan raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but not surprised. He'd known me long enough to understand that when I asked for something, I wasn't asking lightly. "I'm listening," he said, setting the papers aside and giving me his full attention. "I want to destroy Jason," I said bluntly, my voice low but firm. "And I need you to help me do it." Ruhan didn't flinch. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "Explain," he said, his tone calm, but there was a sharpness to it now. "I'm done being the good girl, the one who forgives, the one who stands by and lets him do whatever he wants. This isn't just about revenge. It's about making him pay for everything he's done, to me and to my family." He thought he could walk away from our wedding without a second thought. And now, he's going to feel the consequences of his actions. I want him to lose everything. I could see the wheels turning in Ruhan's head. He was a businessman, after all. He wasn't just thinking about emotions. He was calculating, assessing the best way to bring Jason down. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Ruhan asked. "Because this isn't just about your emotions. Jason isn't going to sit idly by and let you dismantle his life. He'll fight back, and you'll be in the center of that battle." "I don't care," I said, my voice sharper now, the anger burning bright in my chest. "He needs to learn that there are consequences for using people, for playing with their hearts, their lives. I've spent years waiting for him to choose me, and now he's chosen Grace. Fine, let him have her, but I'm taking everything else, and I'm starting with his business." Ruhan looked at me, his gaze piercing, like he was weighing something in his mind. Then, without hesitation, he nodded. "I'm in, but we're going to have to be careful. Jason's got a lot of powerful allies. If we're going to do this, we need to move strategically." I smiled. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of purpose. The plan was set. Jason's world was about to come crashing down, and I would be the one to make it happen. The next few days were a blur of strategizing, organizing, and executing the plan. Ruhan and I worked in tandem, each of us playing our roles to perfection. He was the businessman, and I was the woman with nothing left to lose. Jason's company was struggling, and his name was slipping through the cracks of scandal. He thought he could escape the consequences of his actions, but every decision he made only tightened the noose around his neck. I wasn't just targeting Jason anymore. I was targeting the empire he had built, the one built on my family's back. Ruhan and I had access to his company's financials, and I knew exactly where to strike. The Youngs had relied on my family for years, and I knew their weaknesses. I knew how to expose the cracks in their business, and I wasn't afraid to leverage every single piece of information I had. We started with the contracts, the shady deals, the promises that Jason had made under the table, the ones his family would never want the public to see. They had buried it all deep, thinking no one would dig. But I was digging now. I had the resources to expose the truth, and the more I uncovered, the more satisfying it became. Jason had made his life a house of cards, and I was ready to knock it down. One evening, as I pored over documents, a message from Ruhan came through. He had secured a meeting with one of Jason's biggest investors, someone who had no love for the Young family but had always been too afraid to speak out. Ruhan promised that with this meeting, we could initiate a chain reaction that would bring the Young family to its knees. Meet me at the office tomorrow at 10 a.m. Ruhan's message read, "This is our moment." I couldn't help the small smile that tugged at my lips. It was happening. Everything was falling into place, and Jason was going to feel every single ounce of it. The next morning, I dressed carefully, not for anyone else, but for me, for the woman I had become. I wasn't dressing for Jason's approval anymore. I wasn't dressing for anyone. I was dressing to show the world that I was no longer that naive girl who had believed in fairy tales. Today, I was going to break his world apart, piece by piece. ATM sharp, I arrived at Ruhan's office. He was already there, waiting for me with a knowing look in his eyes. "It's time," he said, standing up as I walked in. I nodded, feeling the weight of what we were about to do settle on my shoulders. "Let's make it count." The investor, a man named Jack Liu, was already seated. He was older than I expected, but his eyes held a sharpness that reminded me of Ruhan. He wasn't here for pleasantries. He was here because he knew that the Young family's empire was crumbling, and he was ready to take advantage of it. "I know what you want," Jack said, his voice low and steady. "But before we do anything, I need to be sure you can deliver. The Youngs have been running this city for years. If we make a move against them, it'll be a war, and you need to be prepared for that." "I'm prepared," I said, my voice firm. "I've spent my entire life under their thumb. I know how they operate. Jason might think he can run away from this, but I won't let him. I won't let them." Ruhan leaned forward, his expression hardening. "We have everything we need to dismantle them. We just need you to make the first move. Your investment will tip the scales." Jack studied me for a moment, as if deciding whether he could trust me. Finally, he nodded. "All right, I'm in, but don't think it'll be easy. The Youngs have their claws everywhere. We'll have to be quick and precise," I replied. "There's no room for mistakes." The deal was struck. I could feel the power shifting already. I wasn't just going after Jason anymore. I was taking down his entire world, and I wasn't going to stop until there was nothing left. That evening, as I returned home, my mind was buzzing with what we had just set in motion. Ruhan had helped me open a door, but it was up to me to push through it. I wasn't just fighting for revenge anymore. I was fighting for control of my own destiny. I picked up my phone, scanning through messages from my parents. They were worried. Of course, they didn't understand why I was so determined, why I wasn't broken by the wedding disaster. But they hadn't seen what I had seen. They didn't know how deep the betrayal ran, how much Jason had taken from me, from all of us. As I scrolled, a message from Jason popped up. He was trying to reach me again. It had been days since he'd last tried to apologize, but I wasn't interested in his words anymore. He could grovel all he wanted. He could beg for forgiveness, but it didn't matter. What mattered was how he would face the consequences of his actions. I didn't reply. Instead, I deleted his message, and with it, every last bit of the hope I once had for him. The next day, the first domino fell. We went public with the financial irregularities at the Young family's company. It started small leaks of documents showing illegal dealings, shady investments, and questionable alliances. But as the news spread, it gained momentum. The more the public and investors questioned the young family's integrity, the more their empire began to crumble. Jason's once immaculate reputation was now tainted, and every single person who had once supported him began to question everything they had believed in. But this was only the beginning. Jason, of course, wasn't going to sit idly by and let this happen. I knew he would retaliate. He would try to fix it. He would use every trick in the book to salvage what little he could. But I wasn't afraid. This was my fight now. It had only been a few days since we exposed the first cracks in the young family's empire, and already the world was watching. The once pristine reputation of Jason Young was in tatters. His company, the one he had built with his blood, sweat, and the help of my family's resources, was sinking fast. Investors were pulling out left and right, and the media was having a field day with the allegations. But as much as I relished in the justice that was unfolding, I knew this was only the beginning. I had made my move, but I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The news broke first thing in the morning, and by mid-afternoon, the internet was flooded with scandalous headlines. Jason Young under fire for shady business dealings. One article screamed. Another, Young's fortune at risk. Investors pull back amid growing scandal. The more I read, the more satisfaction I felt. But beneath that, something darker was starting to stir. I wasn't just punishing Jason. I was punishing everyone who had ever crossed me. Ruhan had done his part. The leaks were timed perfectly, the documents convincing, but it was the way the media ran with it that had truly shocked Jason. They hadn't just picked up the story, they'd shredded him with it. And I knew, deep down, that Jason was about to spiral. I'd seen him break down before, during those dark nights when Grace's sudden departure had left him hollow. I had been the one to console him, to patch him up every time he came running back. But now, there was no one left to fix him. He had nothing to fall back on. And this time, I wasn't going to catch him when he fell. Later that afternoon, I received a call from my father. His voice was tight with anxiety, but there was something else in it, regret maybe? Or maybe it was guilt. He had been quiet for days, trying to figure out how to salvage what little was left of our family's reputation. His once unshakable confidence was gone. Emma, we need to talk, he said, his voice low. I just got off the phone with the Youngs. Jason wants to meet with us. Jason? I asked, my voice barely containing the disbelief. What does he want? He wants to make a deal. He's worried about the company. The family business is in jeopardy. They're scrambling, Emma, and now they're asking us for help. The words stung like a slap to the face. After everything Jason had done, everything he had taken from me, from my family, he had the nerve to come crawling back. It was almost laughable. Did he think I could just fix it for him? Did he honestly believe I would forget the way he'd abandoned me, the way he had chased after Grace at our wedding? No, I said firmly without hesitation. We don't help him. Emma, listen, my father pressed, his voice desperate. You don't understand. If the Youngs go under, it will affect us. Our business dealings, everything. You need to think about this carefully. We could lose everything. I bit my lip, trying to hold back the surge of anger that rose in my chest. Everything? What had they lost? My father had been ready to sacrifice everything, including me, for his business dealings with the Young family. What about my future? My peace of mind? The years I'd spent chasing after someone who had never cared for me the way I had cared for him. I've thought about it, I said coldly. We're done with the Youngs, Dad. It's over. I could hear the silence on the other end of the line. My father, the man who had always been in control, who had always made the tough calls, didn't know how to respond. This was the first time I had ever stood my ground against him. I'll see you at home, he said after a beat, and the call ended. I hung up, the weight of the conversation still heavy on my shoulders. I didn't care about the business anymore. I didn't care about saving face or pretending that everything was fine. What mattered now was my own peace, and Jason had taken that from me, over and over again. But as I sat there, my phone buzzed with a message from Ruhan. His words were brief, but to the point. The next phase is ready. We move tonight. I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. We were about to make the final blow. Jason was already drowning, but now we were going to make sure he never resurfaced. The night was silent, but the tension was thick in the air as Ruhin and I met at his office once again. His eyes were sharp with focus, his demeanor professional, the perfect accomplice in this game of revenge. We're going to hit him where it hurts the most, Ruhin said as he pulled up the latest reports. We've got the evidence we need. The public's already watching, but it's time to bring in the regulators. We leak these financial statements, the ones Jason tried to cover up, and his whole empire will come crashing down. Not just his company, but his entire financial network. He won't be able to recover from this. I took a deep breath, my hands steady as I watched him prepare the documents. This was the moment we had been waiting for. It wasn't just about exposing Jason anymore. It was about taking everything from him the way he had taken everything from me. We do this right, and there's no coming back for him, I said quietly, almost to myself. Ruhin looked up, his expression unreadable. Once we hit send, there's no turning back. You sure? I nodded. Do it. He clicked a few keys, sending the files to the right people, the ones who could make the waves ripple out to the public. The financial regulators, the press, the investors, everyone who needed to see what Jason had been hiding. It was going to explode. And when it did, Jason would be the one standing in the ashes. The next morning, the news broke. And it was bigger than anything I could have imagined. Jason's empire was crumbling in real time. The media frenzy was out of control, with analysts predicting the end of his business empire. And this time, he couldn't escape. But I wasn't done. Not yet. The morning after we leaked the financial documents, I could barely contain the satisfaction that simmered beneath the surface. The media had erupted, and Jason's once unstoppable empire was teetering on the brink of collapse. Headlines screamed his name, but this time, it was a name associated with scandal and dishonor. The carefully crafted image he had built over the years, the polished facade of the successful businessman, was now nothing more than a crumbling monument to his arrogance. I was no longer the girl who had once desperately clung to him. I was the woman who had made him pay, and I could feel the weight of that power in every fiber of my being. By mid-afternoon, I received a call that sent a chill through my spine. It wasn't from Jason. It wasn't from my father. It was from Grace. Emma, we need to talk, she said, her voice trembling with something I couldn't quite place. Can we meet? I stared at my phone, the irony of the situation sinking in. Grace, the woman who had been the object of Jason's obsession, now calling me? After everything? It felt almost too surreal. But then, I remembered. Grace had always been a pawn in Jason's game, and she was just as much of a victim as I had been, wasn't she? But this wasn't about her. This was about me. I had waited too long to let anyone else control my story. Still, curiosity gnawed at me. What could she possibly want? I agreed to meet her, but I wasn't going to make it easy. This time, I was in control. I arrived at the cafe where we agreed to meet. It was quiet, intimate, the perfect setting for a conversation filled with tension and unspoken words. Grace was already sitting at a table, her eyes darting nervously around the room. When she saw me, her face softened, though it held a hint of apprehension. Emma, she said softly as I sat down across from her. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I studied her, taking in her fragile posture, the way her hands fidgeted with the edge of her cup. She seemed lost, broken, but wasn't that the truth of it? All along, she had been chasing something she could never have, just as Jason had been chasing the version of her that didn't exist. What do you want, Grace? I asked, my voice colder than I had intended. Grace flinched, but she didn't shy away. I know what you must think of me, she began, her voice thick with emotion. But please, I didn't want any of this. I never wanted to hurt you. I leaned back in my chair, my arms crossed. Her words were familiar, but they meant nothing to me now. I had heard every excuse in the book. Jason's love for her had always been the one thing that had controlled my life, and I had let it. But now, I was done with being the forgiving one. I had nothing left to give. You didn't want to hurt me? I scoffed, the bitter laugh escaping before I could stop it. Grace, you're just as much of a player in this as Jason is. Don't think for 1 second that you're innocent. She winced, but didn't argue. I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't forgive me either. Her voice faltered. But Jason, he's lost everything, Emma. He's not who you think he is. He never was. Is that supposed to make me feel sorry for him? I asked, my voice sharp. He's ruined my life, Grace, my family's future. And now, he's going to lose everything he's ever cared about. So no, I don't feel sorry for him. I don't feel sorry for you either, because you're just as much a part of this." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a brief moment, I saw the girl I had once been, the one who had yearned for love, for someone to choose her. But that girl was dead. The woman sitting across from Grace was someone who had learned the hard way that love was often nothing more than a dangerous game. "I know what he did to you," she whispered, "and I regret it. I do. But Jason, he's not who he was before. He's broken." I took a deep breath, forcing my emotions to stay in check. The last thing I wanted to do was let her see me crack. Grace had hurt me in her own way, but she wasn't the one who had promised me the world and then shattered it. She wasn't the one who had destroyed everything I had ever hoped for. "You're both just living in a fantasy," I said flatly. "Jason has always been chasing something he could never have. And you've been chasing him. But you're wrong. He's not broken. He's just selfish. And now, I'm taking everything from him that he values. He can't fix what he's done, and neither can you." Grace's face twisted in confusion. You're doing this to hurt him, aren't you?" she asked, her voice low. I didn't hesitate. "Yes, I am. But it's not just about hurting him. It's about making him realize the price of betrayal. He's not the victim here. I am. And I'm done letting him get away with it." There was a long silence between us, and for a moment, I thought Grace might get up and walk away. But she didn't. Instead, she wiped her eyes, as though she was searching for something, some kind of closure, some explanation that would make this all feel less painful. "I just wanted to say," she began hesitantly, "that I never meant for this to happen. I never meant for him to hurt you." I stared at her, her words ringing in my ears. It was almost laughable. She hadn't meant for any of it to happen. But here we were, both of us caught in the wreckage of Jason's choices. And as much as I hated him, a small part of me couldn't deny that he was the one who had torn everything apart. I was done being the one who tried to fix it, done trying to make peace with a situation that had never been mine to fix. "Grace," I said finally, my voice steady, "I don't care about your regrets. I've moved on. I'm going to make sure Jason pays for what he's done, and you need to do the same." I stood up, not waiting for her response. There was nothing more to say. The only thing that mattered now was finishing this. The days after my meeting with Grace were a blur. Jason's empire was crumbling faster than I'd anticipated, and every day seemed to bring new chaos. Reports of his company's financial struggles filled the news, his stock price plummeting, and the investors who had once blindly followed him were now fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. But as the world continued to watch Jason fall, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of emptiness. This wasn't enough. Seeing his life unravel wasn't enough for me. The pain, the humiliation, the endless years of being second choice, of living in the shadow of his obsession with Grace, it had all led to this moment. But it still didn't feel like enough. Jason had taken everything from me. My love, my trust, my family's reputation, my future. And now, he was losing it all, but I wasn't going to stop until he felt every single bit of what he had put me through. One evening, as I sat in my office, reviewing documents and making phone calls to finalize the next phase of our plan, I received a text. It was from Jason. "I need to talk to you." I stared at the message for a long time. My finger hovered over the screen, the temptation to respond, to see what he wanted, to hear his voice gnawing at me. But I didn't give in. Not this time. Instead, I called Ruhan. He answered immediately, his tone calm as always. "What's the plan now?" he asked. "It's time for Jason to come face to face with everything he's lost," I said, my voice steady, but there was an edge to it. "We've given him time to feel the pressure. Now we need to put the final nail in the coffin." Ruhan didn't hesitate. "Agreed. We have the information we need. The documents on his hidden assets, they'll expose everything. The bank accounts, the shell companies, the money laundering. We can take this public, and once it's out there, it'll be game over. Let's do it," I said firmly. "But I want him to know exactly who did this to him. I want him to feel every bit of the consequences. I want him to know that it was me who brought him down. Not just his mistakes, not just his greed, me." There was a brief pause before Ruhan replied, "You've made your choice, and I'll back you up. We move tomorrow." I hung up the phone, my mind racing. This was it. Once we made this move, there would be no going back. Jason would know that it was me who had dismantled his empire, piece by piece. But more than that, he would know that I was done being the victim. I had fought for my power, for my future, and now I was about to make sure that he would never get back what he had taken. The next morning, I was up early, going over everything again. My heart beat faster as I prepared to finalize everything. The truth was, despite all my anger, despite my desire for revenge, there was still a part of me that feared what would come next. What would Jason do when he realized it was me who had orchestrated his downfall? Would he come after me? Would he try to retaliate in a way that would hurt my family? But in that moment, I realized something crucial. I didn't care anymore. I was done with fear, done with second-guessing myself. Jason had taught me how to hate, and now I would use that hate to bring him to his knees. I looked over at the file on my desk, the final piece of evidence. It was ready. It was time. At noon, Ruhin and I met again at his office. We had everything set up, a press release to go out, the documents ready to be sent to the media, and a plan for the public fallout. But there was still one thing I needed to do. I had to deliver the final blow in person. I'm going to see him, I said quietly, my gaze locked on Ruhin's. I need him to see me, to understand that everything that's happening to him now, this is my doing. Ruhin hesitated for a moment, then nodded. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I made my way to Jason's office, the weight of my decision pressing heavily on my chest. As I entered the building, I couldn't shake the feeling of finality. This was no longer about revenge for what he had done to me. This was about reclaiming my life and making sure Jason understood that he could never control me again. When I entered his office, Jason looked up in surprise. He looked worn out, his face pale and his eyes heavy. His suit, once sharp and pristine, now seemed rumpled, as though the weight of his failures was starting to take its toll. Emma, he said, his voice hoarse. What are you doing here? I stood there for a moment, letting the silence stretch between us. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when I would no longer be the quiet, forgiving girl. I came to watch you lose everything, I said, my voice cold, deliberate. Jason's face hardened, and I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes. You don't know what you're doing. You're playing with fire, Emma. I took a step forward, my gaze never leaving his. No, Jason, you are the one who started the fire, and now it's time to watch it burn. I placed the file on his desk, the same file containing the damning evidence of his illegal activities, the hidden accounts, the money laundering. Do you want to know how this ends? I asked, my voice low and steady. It ends with you losing everything. Your reputation, your company, your so-called future. All of it, gone. Because of me. Jason's face twisted in disbelief, and for the first time, I saw him falter. The cocky, arrogant man who had once treated me like an afterthought was now staring at me like a man who had been caught in his own trap. You think this is over? He sneered. You think you've won? You have no idea who I am. I leaned in closer, my voice a whisper. I don't care who you are anymore, Jason. You never mattered to me. Not really. I'm done with you. With that, I turned and walked out of the office, leaving him there, a man who had been brought low by his own actions. As I exited the building, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. It was finally over. Jason had lost, and I had won. The days following my confrontation with Jason were chaotic. The media, the regulators, the investors, everyone had descended upon him like vultures. The press release had gone live, the documents leaked, and the fallout was instantaneous. His wealth was unraveling faster than I could have ever imagined. But in all of this, there was one thing I hadn't counted on: his desperation. Jason wasn't going down without a fight. He started calling again and again, leaving voice messages that were increasingly filled with guilt, anger, and fear. At first, I ignored them. The words had no power over me anymore. But then, one night, I received a message that I couldn't simply brush aside. I'm sorry, Emma. I was wrong. I should have never treated you that way. You're right. You were always the one who cared about me. I was just too blind to see it. Please, I'll fix everything. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. Just don't let me lose everything. Please, I'm begging you. His voice, raw and desperate, echoed through my phone. Part of me felt the old pang of sympathy, the part that had once wanted to save him, to heal the brokenness between us. But That part of me was dead. Jason had taken my forgiveness for granted for too long. Now, it was my turn to show him the consequences of his actions. I couldn't let him get away with it. Not after everything. I picked up the phone and dialed Ruhan's number. When he answered, I didn't waste any time. He's desperate. He's trying to bargain, but I'm not giving him an inch. Ruhan's voice was calm, steady. We've already done what we needed to do. The pieces are falling into place. Jason can't fix this. He's done. I know, I replied, my tone firm. But I want him to know exactly who did this. I want him to understand that it's not just about the business. It's about everything he took from me, from us. Ruhan paused, and then, without hesitation, he agreed. I'll set up the final meeting. Tomorrow, it's time to make sure Jason knows he's lost for good. The following day, I arrived at the meeting place, a sleek, cold boardroom in the heart of the city. Jason was already there, waiting, looking like a man who had been through hell and back. His suit was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. The pride he once exuded had evaporated, replaced by something I couldn't quite place: fear, regret, desperation. As I stepped into the room, he stood up, his face falling when he saw me. Emma, he started, his voice tight. Please, I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just trying to protect what was mine. You have to understand, I never meant to hurt you. I met his gaze, holding it steadily. This was it. The moment when he would finally understand what it felt like to be powerless, to have everything he had worked for ripped away. Jason, I said, my voice calm, even, you're right about one thing: you didn't mean to hurt me. But that doesn't change the fact that you did. You used me. You treated me like I was nothing. And now, you're paying the price for it. His face twisted with anger. You think this is easy for me? You think I'm enjoying this? You think I wanted to lose everything? I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. This isn't about your loss, Jason. This is about the damage you caused. This is about you paying for every lie, every betrayal, every moment you used me for your own gain and then discarded me when it didn't suit you. He shook his head, his voice trembling. I'm sorry. I've always loved you. I never stopped loving you. I let out a short, bitter laugh. No, you loved the idea of me. You loved the way I fit into your life, but you never truly loved me. You were too busy chasing a fantasy grace, your business, your own ambition to even see what you had in front of you. Jason's face turned pale, the last vestiges of his composure crumbling. Please, Emma, he whispered. I can't lose everything. Not like this. I paused, looking at him. For a split second, I almost felt a flicker of sympathy. But then, I remembered everything he had put me through. The years of doubt, of heartbreak. The moments where I was left alone, waiting for a man who never truly saw me. No, Jason, I said firmly. You're not going to lose everything. You've already lost it, and you've earned every bit of it. His shoulders slumped in defeat, and for the first time, I saw the broken man he truly was. But it was too late. There was no sympathy left in me for him. He had lost me forever. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. And then, in that moment, something shifted. I knew exactly what had to be done. I'm done, Jason, I said, my voice unwavering. I don't need you anymore. I don't need to fix your mistakes. I'm not the girl who chases after a man who doesn't deserve her. I've reclaimed my life, and I'm moving on. With that, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving Jason behind, a man who had lost everything, not because of me, but because of his own greed, his own obsession. He was no longer my problem. As I left the building, I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. This was freedom. I was no longer tied to him, no longer bound by the mistakes of my past. And for the first time in my life, I could see a future that was entirely my own, a future where I was in control. Weeks passed, and Jason's downfall was complete. The company went under, and the once immense fortune he had accumulated was reduced to rubble. He lost everything: his wealth, his status, and most importantly, his self-respect. The media continued to cover his fall from grace, and soon even grace, his so-called white moonlight, disappeared from the spotlight, unable to withstand the weight of the scandal. But I had moved on. My family's business had stabilized, and I had taken control of my future. I wasn't the naive girl who had once believed in fairy tales. I wasn't the woman who had clung to a man who would never love her the way she deserved. I had learned that revenge wasn't about destroying, someone else's life. It was about reclaiming your own. Jason's world was in ruins, and I was finally free.